The popular modern scientific materialist atheist worldview propagated by NASA, the mainstream media, and the public education system is that you are here because nothingness, for no reason, exploded and created everything. Before time, space, matter, consciousness, intelligence, and life, there was nothing. Yes, first, some of the more gaseous nothing came together forming suns and stars, then solid pieces of the nothing came together forming planets and moons. Then the nothing turned hydrogen, and oxygen came together forming water on the nothing planet Earth, out of which single-celled living organisms magically appeared. These tiny beings got to work dividing and multiplying into multi-celled conscious organisms, which multiplied and divided and mutated into various forms of sea life. These creatures adapted and evolved and crawled onto land, replaced gills with lungs, lost tails, grew opposable thumbs, and started grasping at straws, like this ridiculous nihilistic notion of Big Bang evolution. This anti-God materialist theory of evolution has been staunchly protected by the infallibility of science for over 150 years. But in actual fact, just as science has failed to find one true, valid proof that Earth is a ball spinning around the sun, scientists have failed to discover a single piece of evidence that the material world is a product of blind chance evolution. Evolutionary theory claims that life started with a cell that formed by chance. According to this scenario, 4 billion years ago, various lifeless chemical compounds underwent a reaction in the primordial atmosphere on the Earth, in which the effects of thunderbolts and atmospheric pressure led to the formation of the first living cell. The first thing that must be said is that the claim that inanimate materials can come together to form life is an unscientific one that has not been verified by any experiment or observation. Life is only generated from life. Each living cell is formed by the replication of another cell. No one in the world has ever succeeded in forming a living cell by bringing inanimate materials together, not even in the most advanced laboratories. How could all the interconnected and compartmentalized components, the cell wall, the cell membrane, the mitochondria, proteins, DNA, RNA, ribosomes, lysosomes, cytoplasm, vacuoles, nucleus, and other cell parts magically come together and create conscious, intelligent life from unconscious stamina? Just making one average-sized protein molecule is already composed of 288 amino acids of 12 varying types, which can be combined in 10 to the 300 power different ways. Of all those possibilities, only one forms the desired protein molecule, and there are over 600 types of proteins combined in the smallest bacterias ever discovered. Astronomer Fred Hoyle compared the odds that all the multifaceted and multifunctional parts of a cell could coincidentally come together and create life analogous to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a Boeing 747 from the materials therein. Even if scientists placed all the chemical substances necessary for life in a tank, applied to them any processes of their choice, and waited for billions of years, not a single living cell could or would ever form. The likelihood of the spontaneous formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number with 40,000 zeros after it. It is big enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. The beginnings of life were not random. They must have been the product of purposeful intelligence. From my earliest training as a scientist, I was very strongly brainwashed to believe that science cannot be consistent with any kind of deliberate creation. That notion has had to be painfully shed. At the moment, I can't find any rational argument to knock down the view which argues for conversion to God. We used to have an open mind. Now we realise that the only logical answer to life is creation, and not accidental random shuffling. Scientific proofs from such branches of science as paleontology, microbiology, and anatomy reveal evolution to be a bankrupt theory. It has been stressed that evolution is incompatible with scientific discoveries, reason, and logic. Those who believe in the theory of evolution think that a few atoms and molecules thrown into a huge vat could produce thinking, reasoning professors, university students, scientists, artists, antelopes, lemon trees, and carnations. Moreover, the scientists and professors who believe in this nonsense are educated people. That is why it is quite justifiable to speak of the theory of evolution as the most potent spell in history. Never before has any other belief or idea so taken away people's powers of reason, refused to allow them to think intelligently and logically, and hidden the truth from them as if they had been blindfolded. The Big Bang Theory is easily proven false, as the nature of explosions is to destroy, to break things down into their constituent parts, increasing chaos and decreasing order. Explosions simply do not and cannot create things, causing disparate parts to combine into more ordered wholes, as the Big Bang Theory contends. Similarly, the theory of evolution is proven false by entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. It is a fact that systems left to their own devices tend to become corrupted, disordered, and dispersed over time. All things, living or not, wear out, deteriorate, and decay. They do not spontaneously come together over time in incredibly implausible combinations, creating diverse, complex, and beautiful living forms. Thus, the theory of evolution is in direct opposition to the law of entropy. Evolution supposes things become more ordered, more structured, and more complex over time. But from rust to mould to rotting corpses, nature is everywhere at odds with such a notion. Organic matter can self-reproduce only if it exists as a fully developed cell with all its organelles and in an appropriate environment where it can survive, exchange materials, and get energy from its surroundings. This means that the first cell on Earth was formed all of a sudden, together with its amazingly complex structure. What would you think if you went out hiking in the depths of a thick forest and ran across a brand new car among the trees? Would you imagine that various elements in the forest had come together by chance over millions of years and produced such a vehicle? All the parts in the car are made of products such as iron, copper, and rubber, the raw ingredients for which are all found on the Earth. But would this fact lead you to think that these materials had synthesized by chance and then come together and manufactured such a car? There is no doubt that anyone with a sound mind would realize that the car was the product of an intelligent design, in other words, a factory, and wonder what it was doing there in the middle of the forest. The sudden emergence of a complex structure in a complete form, quite out of the blue, shows that this is the work of an intelligent agent. An extraordinarily complex system like the cell is no doubt created by a superior will and wisdom. In other words, it came into existence as a creation of God. According to the theory of evolution, every living species has emerged from a predecessor. One species which existed previously turned into something else over time, and all species have come into being in this way. According to the theory, this transformation proceeds gradually over millions of years. If this were the case, then innumerable intermediate species should have lived during the immense period of time when these transformations were supposedly occurring. For instance, there should have lived in the past some half-fish, half-reptile creatures which had acquired some reptilian traits in addition to the fish traits they already had. Or there should have existed some reptile bird creatures which had acquired some avian traits in addition to the reptilian traits they already possessed. Evolutionists refer to these imaginary creatures, which they believe to have lived in the past, as transitional forms. If such animals had really existed, there would have been millions, even billions of them. More importantly, the remains of these creatures should be present in the fossil record. The number of these transitional forms should have been even greater than that of present animal species, and their remains should be found all over the world. Charles Darwin, in his Origin of Species, the veritable Bible of atheist materialists, stated that, if my theory be true, numberless intermediate varieties, linking most closely all of the species of the same group together, must assuredly have existed. Consequently, evidence of their former existence could be found only amongst fossil remains. Darwin himself knew no such transitional forms had been discovered and hoped that they would be found in the future. He even admitted in his Difficulties on Theory chapter that these missing intermediate forms were the biggest stumbling block for his theory. He called it the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. Darwin's theory is a concept that concerns not only biology, chemistry, astronomy, and metaphysics, but actually formed the basis for new political outlooks as well. Within a very short time, this new progressive political attitude was redefined as social Darwinism. And as many historians have suggested, social Darwinism became the ideological basis of fascism, communism, and eugenics. Darwin's ideas of natural selection and survival of the fittest were central to the insane ideologies of many of the 20th century's worst mass murderers, including Mao, Stalin, Lenin, Trotsky, Marx, and Pol Pot. Charles Darwin himself was a blatant racist who elucidated in his book The Descent of Man how blacks and Aborigines, due to their inferiority to Caucasians, would be done away with by the civilized races in time. Freemasonic records state that Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was a philosopher, scientist, and physician who advanced ideas on evolution back in the 18th century. Before coming to Derby in 1788, Dr. Darwin had been made a Mason in the famous time immemorial lodge of Canongate, Kilwinning, No. 2 of Scotland. He also maintained close connections to the Jacobin Masons in France and Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati. Sir Francis Darwin and Reginald Darwin, two of his sons, were also made Masons in Tyrian Lodge No. 253 at Derby. Charles Darwin does not appear on the rolls of the lodge, but it is most likely that he, like his grandfather, his sons, and his bulldog T.H. Huxley, was a Mason. Charles wrote that he used to listen to his grandfather's ideas of evolution and was greatly influenced by them. Erasmus was the first man to put forward the notion of evolution in England. He was known as a respected person, but he had a very dark private life and at least 2 illegitimate children. Charles himself would go on to marry his first cousin and have 3 children die due to complications from inbreeding.